Give me all the Kelvin references. Oh, come on. I think you guys know me well enough that it shouldn't be a surprise. That's the first thing to call out in this episode. Hello, geeks, freaks, and all those unique. This is Emcee Frodis, and we're talking about episode 2 of season 3 of Lower Decks, The Least Dangerous Game. Right off the bat, my favorite thing about this episode is shaking up the character dynamics. Lower Decks has been pretty consistent in its Mariner and Boimler taking the A story, while Tendi and Rutherford take the B story. While it's not always the case, sometimes we do get a bit of a change. This particular grouping is very unusual. Tendi and Boimler were only ever put together in Much Ado About Boimler, and the only time Mariner and Rutherford have ended up together is in Mugatu Gamado, when Boimler was along for the ride. Pairing other characters for stories keeps things fresh and allows us to understand how everyone interacts with one another. In our cold open, we get our Lower Deckers playing a Dungeons & Dragons-inspired game, Batflets and Binocs, hosted by General Martok, voiced by the great J.G. Hertzler. I adore Martok, and I love having him back, even if it's just in holographic form. It makes me so happy. In my mind, I like to think that he actually did the recordings himself, because Martok is just a cool guy, and I could see him trading some holosuite time with Quark in exchange for his likeness. Oh, Quark 100% is behind this endeavor, and I like to think Martok is in on it. Obviously, Gowron wasn't available, but I live in hope that Martok thought this would bring glory to his house. From here, we split our characters off into their two plots. The first, and I think the best of them, is where we get the title of the episode. Tendi encourages Boimler to be bolder and to say yes to more things without making plans. Of course, old Boims is more than capable of screwing this up. While at first his say-yes attitude leads to him getting in good with Shax, he eventually finds himself being hunted as prey by the incomparable Cranch. I have what might be considered a pretty unhealthy obsession with the most dangerous game man-hunting man genre. I actually gave an impromptu lecture on this in my modern fiction class, going from the most dangerous game all the way up to Squid Game. Are you at all shocked a girl likes to infodump when she feels her professor isn't giving enough information on the topic? As a popular trope, this has been rife for parody over the years. Boimler's ancestor and ineptitude, Gilligan, had it happen to him on Gilligan's Island. Of course, Simpsons did it. There are countless other examples, but this might be one of my favorite versions of it. They struck a really good balance of earnestness versus ridiculousness. There were two moments that really sold it for me. They were when Captain Freeman got involved and the very ending. When it comes to the ending, we obviously needed to have some sort of resolution that didn't have Boimler dying, and I think they went with the right one. I thought for a moment they might have Shax save him, since Shax does owe Boimler one from playing in the Dirge Choir before, but that would have been the wrong move. Boimler needed to not back down. While Boims might have been completely extra in the way he made himself bold Boimler, it's not the wrong thing for him to do. A captain has to have boldness, and it's just going to take Boims some time to learn how to be measured, taking both sides into account, rather than leaning heavily into cautiousness or boldness. I'm reminded of Captain Picard in Tapestry when I see Boimler in this episode. Picard learned in that episode he needed his boldness to rise from his lowly junior officer position. In the end, Boimler gets in good with two of the senior officers, and he learns that he's allowed to make mistakes, rather than treat everything with caution. On the flip side, we have Mariner's storyline, and while I don't like it quite as much as Boimler's, I think it has a similar idea to it, just on the opposite end of the spectrum. Mariner has never been anything but bold, and here she sees the folly of that rash action. As much as we'd like to condemn Ransom for not acting quickly enough, he acted just as quickly as he needed to. Yes, Billups and Rutherford nearly got sacrificed, but that's kind of an average day on the job for a Starfleet officer. The important thing is that they didn't, because Ransom assessed the situation and made a judgment call. And he did do it on time. They didn't need to rush. Meanwhile, Mariner put herself in serious physical jeopardy because of her impetuousness. Now, an argument could be made that Ransom was wrong in the first place, sending Billups and Rutherford down to the planet instead of him and Mariner going, but I think changing things up was part of the mission. Ransom's current ongoing assignment is tempering Mariner's worst impulses, and the only way that's going to happen is by saying no to her. I think they underestimated how absolutely bonkers the planet was, but I get it, because that planet is absolutely bonkers. A psychic baby, an evil computer, and a sentient volcano, that is a lot to plan for. And most importantly, Ransom was able to actually handle it. Mariner tried to run off on her own, but just think about had she gone down to the planet. Do you think that Mariner would have been able to rescue Rutherford and Billups without massively offending the planet and ruining Starfleet's relationship with them? It really begs the question, why is Mariner on the command track anyways? She doesn't seem to have any interest in diplomacy, which is the main purpose of being in command. Part of me thinks that Mariner just likes bossing people around, except she likes to do it from her lesser position of ensign. To be honest, I've always been a bit mistrustful of people who have no division experience outside of command. Both Kirk and Picard experienced both operations and science before taking command. Sisko was an engineer. Archer and Pike were pilots. Janeway, Saru, and Burnham were all science division prior to taking command. I personally think it's much healthier for someone to serve in another division and then move to command because of their stellar record and being recognized for their leadership qualities, rather than starting out in command and working their way up. I feel somewhat mistrustful of someone whose only ambition it is to command a starship. Is it a good goal? Yes, but it shouldn't be the only goal. That being said, it does track for Mariner's character. She always feels like she knows what's best. And it was also probably a large part of her growing up, with both of her parents being in command, and Freeman in particular being cited for micromanaging. Her family always thinks they know what's best. That might be a big reason why Freeman has turned Mariner's tutelage over to Ransom. Of course, there isn't an emotional element, but since Freeman and Mariner are so much alike, Mariner's never going to learn to temper her worst impulses. But in the end, our lower deckers come back together, and both Mariner and Boimler have grown. Mariner learns she needs to temper herself, and Boimler decides that no matter what bad things have happened, he's still going to be bold in the things he does. These are good evolutions for these characters. Now that we're 2 seasons in, we need to see these characters take positive changes, and they definitely are. These are things that are going to bring these characters out of the lower decks and onto bigger and better things. The Least Dangerous Game is definitely an improvement upon the season premiere. This episode has a sense of movement to it that Grounded was missing. There were some very memorable moments, and I think we're getting some good character development from our main cast. So comment down below with your thoughts about Lower Decks, The Least Dangerous Game. If you like my videos, subscribe to my channel. I do videos about Star Trek, Star Wars, and lots of other geeky things. If you want to support me, please visit my Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee, or you can go to my Redbubble and TeePublic to buy my geeky graphic designs. So until next time, live long, and may the Force be with you. Also, thanks for the mimosas.